Good morning, beloved souls. We rise today carrying numbers in our heads and questions in our hearts. We measure time, weigh outcomes, calculate risks, and call it wisdom. We plan our days with careful hands, believing that if we add enough effort and subtract enough fear, we can arrive safely at joy. But life, has a way of reminding us that the universe does not move by our math alone. This morning we pause to remember a deeper truth. That God's plan is not limited by our logic, nor confined to our expectations. What we call delays may be divine preparation. What we call detours may be holy redirection. And what we call impossible may simply be the place where faith is asked to stand up and speak. So as the sun rises and this prayer begins, let us loosen our grip on certainty and open our hands to trust. For there is a wisdom older than our worries, higher than our calculations, and candid than our fears, and it is already at work in our lives. We are a people who love blueprints. We draw straight lines on curved lives and call it security. We wake each morning armed with calendars, calculators, and careful intentions, believing that if we can just arrange the hours properly, stack our efforts high enough, and predict the next turn of the road, we will be safe from surprise and sorrow. We plan because planning makes us feel powerful. It gives us the illusion that tomorrow can be tamed if today is managed well enough. But life has never been impressed by our neat handwriting. From the beginning of our days, we are taught to measure success by what we can count: years, degrees, salaries, achievements, milestones neatly checked off like groceries on a list. We learn early to trust what we can see and doubt what we cannot. And so our planning becomes an act of self-protection. We calculate not only our money and our time, but our love, our risks, our dreams. We say, I will try, but only this much. We say, I will hope, but not too far. We say, I will believe, but only if the numbers agree. Yet there is a quiet truth that hums beneath all our careful arrangements. Human planning is limited, not because we are foolish or lazy, but because we are human. Our vision is bound by the moment we stand in. We can only see what the light of today reveals, and even then we see it imperfectly. We plan from experience, and experience, while a wise teacher, is also a biased one. It tells us what has happened, not what is possible. Divine purpose, on the other hand, is not confined by yesterday's evidence. God does not plan from fear, nor from scarcity, nor from wounds still aching in the soul. God plans from wholeness, from a vantage point that sees the end curled gently inside the beginning. Where we see a closed door, God sees the hallway it protects. Where we see an ending, God sees a pause pregnant with becoming. Where we see a mistake, God sees material, raw, honest material for redemption. We often say, if only I had known then what I know now. But divine purpose does not require hindsight. It does not need revision or apology. It does not scramble to fix what went wrong. It weaves what went wrong into something that can still go right. Our plans are often shaped by fear dressed up as wisdom. We say we are being practical, but beneath that practicality lives a trembling question: what if I fail? So we plan small. We dream cautiously. We aim just high enough to avoid embarrassment, but not high enough to require courage. We calculate loss more carefully than we imagine joy. We budget our faith like it is a fragile resource, afraid we might run out if we trust too much. But divine purpose is extravagant. It is not reckless, but it is generous. It does not ask permission from our anxiety before moving forward. God's purpose does not consult our past disappointments before opening a future door. It is not intimidated by statistics or slowed by probabilities. What we call unlikely, God calls unfinished. What we call impossible, God calls untried. There are moments in life when our plans collapse like houses built on sand. The job does not come through. The relationship ends without warning. The dream we nurtured like a child slips quietly out of reach. In those moments, we often interpret the pain as proof that we planned poorly or believed foolishly. We blame ourselves for not seeing it coming, as if foresight could have saved us from being human. But sometimes the collapse is not failure. It is exposure. It reveals that the foundation we trusted was never meant to hold the full weight of our destiny. It shows us the limits of our own calculations so that we might finally lift our eyes beyond them. Pain has a way of breaking our addiction to certainty. It reminds us that control was always a fragile companion, loyal only when circumstances were kind. Divine purpose does not promise a life without disruption. It promises a life that cannot be destroyed by disruption. There is a sacred difference between planning and trusting. Planning says, I will move when I understand. Trust says, I will move because I am held. Planning relies on visibility. Trust relies on relationship. Planning demands guarantees. Trust rests in character. And while planning is useful, even necessary, it was never meant to be the throne on which we seat our hope. We are at our wisest when we plan with open hands. Open hands acknowledge effort without worshiping it. They allow room for adjustment, for surprise, for grace. They say, I will do my part, but I will not pretend I am the author of everything. Open hands are not passive, they are receptive. They recognize that the same God who gave us minds to plan also gave us hearts to trust. Think of the times your life took a turn you never would have chosen, yet later recognized as essential. The move you resisted, the ending you grieved, the delay you cursed. At the time your calculations told you it was loss. But time, that quiet revealer, showed you something else growing there, strength you did not know you had, compassion you could not have learned any other way, wisdom that did not come from books but from survival. Divine purpose often speaks in hindsight, not because it was absent before, but because we were listening only to ourselves. We are not wrong to plan. We are wrong to believe our plans are supreme. When planning becomes rigid, it turns brittle. When trust enters, planning becomes flexible, alive, responsive. It can bend without breaking. It can change direction without losing meaning. God's purpose is not threatened by your revisions. You can change careers, change cities, change your mind, change your pace, and still be held inside a purpose that is larger than your detours. Divine purpose is not a narrow line you must walk perfectly or risk falling off forever. It is a wide river capable of carrying you even when you stumble into it by accident. This is not an invitation to abandon responsibility. It is an invitation to release arrogance, to admit that while we are intelligent, we are not omniscient. While we are capable, we are not sovereign. While we are strong, we are not self-sustaining. Morning is a good time to remember this. As the day opens its arms, we are tempted to fill it immediately with tasks, goals, expectations, demands. But before the noise begins, there is a holy pause in which we can say, I have plans, but I trust your purpose more. That simple confession is not defeat. It is alignment. When we accept the limits of our planning, we make room for wonder. We stop treating life like a problem to be solved and begin receiving it as a story still being written. We loosen our grip on outcomes and strengthen our grip on faith. And in doing so, we discover that we were never meant to carry the future alone. God's plan is higher, not to belittle us, but to lift us. Higher than our fears, higher than our miscalculations, higher than our narrow definitions of success. It stretches beyond what we would dare to hope for ourselves and reaches into places we did not know could bloom. So plan, yes. Dream, absolutely. Work with diligence and intention, but do not bow to your calculations as if they were God's. There's a purpose at work that sees you more clearly than you see yourself, loves you more deeply than you love your plans, and is not finished with you even when you think the numbers no longer add up. And that purpose, faithful and patient, is already moving. There are few things that test the human spirit like waiting. Waiting asks us to sit still in a world that applauds movement. It asks us to trust when every instinct urges us to control. It places us in the uncomfortable space between prayer and fulfillment, between promise and proof. And in that space, our hearts often whisper a fearful question, has God forgotten me? We live in an age that worships speed. Fast answers, fast success, fast healing, fast validation. We are taught that if something does not arrive quickly, it may never arrive at all. So when our prayers linger unanswered, when doors remain closed longer than we expected, when life pauses us in places we did not plan to stop, we interpret the silence as rejection. We say, "It must not be meant for me." We say, "If God wanted this for me, it would have happened by now." We confuse delay with denial because patience has not been well taught to us. But delay is not the language of abandonment. Often it is the language of preparation. A denial slams the door and turns away. A delay keeps the door closed while something on the other side is being arranged. We may not see the movement, but movement is happening nonetheless. Roots are growing underground where no applause can reach them. Strength is being built quietly away from the spotlight where character is formed without performance. God does not rush what must last. We rush because we are afraid. Afraid that time will run out. Afraid that someone else will take our place. Afraid that our moment will pass us by while we are still waiting for clarity. But divine timing is not threatened by competition. What is meant for you does not need to be grabbed in haste. It will recognize you when you arrive ready to receive it. Delay often feels like punishment, especially when we have done everything we thought was right. We prayed. We worked, we showed up, we believed, and still, nothing happened. In those moments, faith feels foolish and hope feels heavy. We begin to doubt not only God's timing, but our own worth. We wonder if we asked for too much, dreamed too boldly, trusted too deeply. But delay does not measure your value. It measures alignment. Sometimes what we are asking for is good, but we are not yet positioned to carry it without breaking. Sometimes the blessing is ready, but we are not. And sometimes we are ready, but the world around us needs to shift to make room for what is coming. Divine purpose is not concerned with speed. It is concerned with wholeness. Think of how often we thank God later for prayers that were not answered when we demanded they be. How often we look back and realize that an early yes would have bound us to something that would have shrunk us, silenced us, or wounded us in ways we were not yet strong enough to survive. Delay protected us when we thought it was punishing us. There is a sacred patience in God that we mistake for indifference. God listens fully even in silence. God remembers every tear that fell while you waited. Every quiet morning when you hoped again, even though yesterday disappointed you. Every night when you whispered, "Maybe tomorrow," and went to sleep with unanswered questions. None of it is wasted. None of it is ignored. Waiting seasons refine us. They teach us the difference between desire and destiny. Desire wants relief. Destiny wants transformation. Desire says now. Destiny says not yet. And while not yet feels like refusal to the weary soul, it is often an act of mercy. In the waiting, our motives are purified. We begin to ask ourselves why we want what we want. Is it to be seen or to be useful? Is it to be safe or to be faithful? Is it to escape discomfort or to step into purpose? Delay strips away the reasons that cannot survive time and leaves behind only what is true. We learn humility in the waiting. We learn that we are not in control of outcomes, no matter how sincere our efforts. We learn to pray differently, not with demands, but with openness, not with timelines, but with trust. Waiting teaches us to listen instead of only speaking, to receive instead of always striving. And there is growth that can only happen while nothing seems to be happening. Strength grows in resistance. Wisdom grows in reflection. Compassion grows in shared suffering. If everything arrived on time according to our preferences, we would be strong in accomplishment but weak in empathy. Delay softens us where success might harden us. It gives us the capacity to hold not only blessings but other people's pain. When the answer finally comes, and it will come, though not always in the shape we expected, it often arrives to a different person than the one who first asked the question. The waiting changes us. It stretches our faith, deepens our roots, and broadens our vision. We become able to receive more than we initially requested. Sometimes the delay is not about the thing at all. It is about the becoming. God is not only interested in what you receive, God is deeply invested in who you are when you receive it. A blessing too early can become a burden. A door opened too soon can trap you in a room you were never meant to stay in. Divine love knows this even when we do not. There are seasons when waiting feels lonely, when others seem to move ahead while you remain still, when comparison creeps in and tells you that you are behind, forgotten, overlooked. But timing is not a race. Purpose is not a competition. Someone else's arrival does not delay yours. Your life is not late. It is unfolding, and unfolding takes time. Delay also teaches us how to live without guarantees. It invites us to practice faith not as a transaction, I believe, so I receive, but as a relationship. A relationship that holds steady even when answers do not come on schedule. A relationship that trusts character over circumstance. When we learn to wait without resentment, something holy happens. We stop seeing God as a vending machine and start recognizing God as a companion. We discover that we are not alone in the silence, that the waiting place is not empty. It is inhabited by presence. Morning prayer is especially powerful in seasons of delay. Each morning says, I am still here. Each morning says, I will trust again today. Even when nothing changes outwardly, something shifts inward. Hope becomes quieter, steadier, less desperate. Faith matures from shouting to standing. Delay does not mean God has changed God's mind. It often means God is arranging details you cannot see, protecting you from outcomes you cannot yet understand, or preparing you for impact you have underestimated. What is meant to bless others through you requires depth, and depth is formed slowly. So if you are waiting for healing, for direction, for love, for provision, for clarity, know this: waiting is not wasted time. It is sacred ground. Stand on it with courage. Breathe on it with prayer. Walk through it with patience. The answer is not absent. It is ripening. And when it comes, it will not only meet your need, it will meet the person you have become while you waited. We are creatures of numbers and measures. We count the hours, the dollars, the steps, the chances, the probabilities. We map our lives with calendars, budgets, spreadsheets, and timelines. We plan, we calculate, we strategize. We hold our heads high, convinced that careful calculation will be enough to carry us through. And yet, no matter how meticulous we are, life remains unpredictable. It moves in rhythms we do not understand, bends in directions we do not foresee, and offers mysteries our minds cannot solve. Faith begins at that edge, the edge where our calculations fail. Faith begins not in the certainty of what we see, but in the trust of what we cannot see. It is born when the numbers no longer add up, when the plans we spent hours constructing dissolve before our eyes, when logic says no but the soul whispers yes. It is in those spaces when control slips through our fingers and all we have left is trust, that faith rises like a stubborn sunrise over a darkened horizon. We like certainty because it comforts us. It tells us we are safe. It tells us that if we do everything right, the world will behave predictably. But life does not bend to human formulas. Life is not a math problem to be solved, but a poem to be lived. We cannot measure love, we cannot predict loss, we cannot calculate the impact of a word spoken, a hand held, a prayer offered. And it is here, in the unmeasurable, that faith begins. Faith asks us to step into the unknown with our hearts open. It does not ask for recklessness, but for courage. It does not demand that we abandon reason, but that we recognize its limits. We can plan all we want, but planning alone cannot guarantee the protection of our dreams, the fulfillment of our prayers, or the growth of our character. Faith is the bridge between our best efforts and God's perfect timing. Consider the times when you calculated, when you worked, when you prepared, yet the outcome differed from what you expected. At first it may have seemed like failure, but later, with perspective, you might have realized that what you thought was a wrong turn was actually a new direction, a hidden blessing, a preparation you could not have foreseen. Faith begins in that realization that our understanding is limited, but God's vision is infinite, that our maps are incomplete, but God's plan is whole. Faith is radical. It requires letting go of the illusion of control. It asks us to acknowledge that no matter how smart we are, no matter how careful, we are not the ultimate architects of our lives. This is not defeat. It is liberation. To accept that calculations are limited is to free ourselves from the tyranny of certainty and to open ourselves to the miracles that cannot be measured. Calculations are comforting. Faith is challenging. Calculations are predictable. Faith is mysterious. Calculations live in the realm of logic. Faith lives in the realm of trust. And yet for all our discomfort, faith is the only true path to transformation. It is the only place where hope can take root deep enough to sustain us. When storms come, when heartbreak arrives, when the world does not behave as expected. Faith grows stronger not in ease, but in the face of uncertainty. There is a kind of wisdom in knowing when to stop calculating and start believing. There is a grace in relinquishing control. There is power in saying, I do not have all the answers, but I trust the one who does. Human intelligence can build a plan, but divine wisdom builds destiny. When our calculations end, faith begins. Faith is not passive. It is active trust. It does not mean we do nothing. It means we do what we can and leave the rest in God's hands. It does not mean we stop striving. It means we stop striving alone. It does not mean we abandon preparation. It means we prepare with humility, knowing that the ultimate outcome is beyond our calculations. Faith walks alongside action, not in opposition to it. The most profound moments of life are rarely planned. Love does not calculate, it surprises. Opportunity does not request permission. It appears. Healing does not negotiate with our fears. It restores. Faith is the lens through which we recognize these gifts, even when they do not align with our expectations. It teaches us that life's richness cannot be reduced to formulas, that true fulfillment cannot be scheduled, that the most extraordinary outcomes often arrive in ways we did not imagine. Faith begins where calculations end. Because calculations are finite and faith is infinite. Calculations can tell us the odds, faith tells us the truth. Calculations rely on past experience, faith reaches into the unseen. Calculations measure the measurable, faith embraces the immeasurable. In the mathematics of life, logic is limited, but love, hope, and trust know no bounds. To live by faith is to live courageously. It is to step into uncertainty with confidence that we are not abandoned. It is to recognize that even when plans fail, we are being guided. It is to understand that setbacks are not rejections, detours are not denials, and endings are not absolutes. Faith is the declaration that God's plan is higher than our understanding, broader than our calculations, deeper than our fears. Faith is patient. It waits without despair. It endures without bitterness. It persists without demanding proof. It is nurtured in the quiet moments of reflection, in the whispered prayers of longing, in the steadfast hope that refuses to crumble under disappointment. Faith grows stronger when we encounter what we cannot solve, because it teaches us that life's ultimate truth is not in our ability to control, but in our capacity to trust. Faith is liberating. It frees us from the tyranny of needing to know, the pressure of having it all figured out, the illusion that we can orchestrate every outcome. It allows us to step forward without guarantees, to embrace uncertainty with courage, to live fully without the constant burden of control. When calculations end, fear has no place because trust has taken its hand. There is a sacred beauty in surrendering to faith. It is the recognition that we are part of a larger story, one that we cannot see in its entirety. It is the acknowledgement that even when we cannot predict the next chapter, it will be written with care, purpose, and love. It is the understanding that the tapestry of life is woven not by our hands alone, but by the hands of the one who sees all. Faith begins where calculations end, because life cannot be reduced to numbers. Life is not a problem to be solved. It is a journey to be lived. The most profound moments, the moments of transformation, redemption, and joy, come when we step beyond our logic, beyond our certainty, beyond our understanding. They come when we allow trust to take the lead, when we open our hearts to possibility, when we place our lives in the hands of a wisdom greater than our own. Faith begins where calculations end, and it is in that beginning that we find freedom. Freedom from worry, freedom from control, freedom from the burden of knowing. It is the space where miracles are possible, where hearts are healed, where dreams take flight. It is the place where we learn that life's ultimate measure is not in what we can plan, but in what we can trust. So when your mind has run out of formulas, when your efforts have exhausted all logic, when the path forward seems uncertain, this is the moment to breathe, to pray, to believe. Faith is ready to meet you there, waiting not for your understanding, but for your willingness to trust. And when you step into it, you will discover that life's true riches were never meant to be calculated, but embraced. Faith begins where calculations end. And in that sacred place, your life begins to unfold in ways your mind could never have predicted, in ways your heart always hoped for, in ways only God could orchestrate. Fear is a natural companion to the human heart. It arrives quietly at first, a shadow across our mind, a whisper in our chest. It tells us to stop, to retreat, to measure the danger before taking the step. Fear teaches caution, yes, but it also often distorts truth, magnifies uncertainty, and confines our vision. It asks us to shrink ourselves, to play small, to settle for safety over purpose. And yet life calls us forward, presses us into growth, and nudges us toward experiences that our fear cannot imagine. This is where God's vision enters, not as a whisper of worry, but as a clarion call to courage, to faith, to expansive living. God's vision is not limited by what frightens us. It does not see only the obstacles or the what-ifs. It does not focus on the possible loss or the risk of failure. God sees the entirety of the journey, the detours, the hidden blessings, the lessons in waiting, and the triumphs we cannot yet perceive. What appears impossible to the fearful mind is already visible to divine eyes. What paralyzes the human heart is already mapped in God's plan, complete with grace, provision, and protection. Fear is often loud, and its voice can drown out wisdom. It magnifies doubt and exaggerates risk. Fear asks, "What if you fall?" while faith counters, "What if you fly?" Fear restricts movement, narrows vision, and convinces us that the world is smaller than it truly is. God's vision, however, is expansive. It stretches beyond the boundaries of circumstance, beyond the walls built by worry, beyond the limits our minds have imposed. It is a vision that sees potential, purpose, and promise even when we cannot. Many of us walk through life with fear as our default guide. We fear rejection, failure, disappointment, loss, the unknown. We fear that stepping into something new will bring pain. We fear that our dreams are too big, too bold, too ambitious. And in that fear we settle for the ordinary, the safe, the predictable. We cling to what we know rather than reaching for what we are meant to become. But God's vision asks us to release that grip, to step beyond the comfort of familiarity, and to trust that a greater story is unfolding than the one our fear imagines. God's vision is bigger than fear because it encompasses not only our desires but our growth. Fear sees risk, God sees preparation. Fear sees the end, God sees the beginning and the middle and the end. Fear counts the obstacles, God counts the victories yet to be revealed. Fear is concerned with survival, God is concerned with destiny. And when we align ourselves with this divine vision, we discover that what once seemed terrifying becomes an opportunity for courage, an invitation to strength, a call to live beyond limitation. Consider the moments in your own life when fear tried to hold you back. When the path seemed too uncertain, too daunting, too steep, when your heart hesitated and your mind calculated all the ways you could fail. And yet when you stepped forward despite fear, when you trusted beyond the numbers, you found that you were capable of more than you imagined. You discovered that the world was wider, brighter, and more forgiving than your fear had suggested. This is the nature of God's vision. It sees the fullness of your potential before fear notices it. Fear thrives on imagining worst-case scenarios. It thrives on what-ifs and shadows. It thrives on our focus on limitations. But God's vision thrives on possibility. It thrives on hope. It thrives on the realization that we are equipped, prepared, and loved in ways that fear cannot comprehend. God's vision reassures us that even when the road is uncertain, we are not alone. That even when we cannot see the outcome, we are guided. That even when we doubt ourselves, we are already upheld by divine strength. God's vision calls us to courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in the presence of fear. Courage is stepping forward when the unknown looms, when the mind says retreat, when the heart trembles. Courage is the daily choice to trust a vision bigger than our fear, to align with a plan that stretches beyond what our eyes can see. Courage is the vehicle through which divine possibility becomes reality. Fear whispers, "You cannot." God whispers, "I have already made a way." Fear points to obstacles, God points to opportunities. Fear counts the threats, God counts the blessings. Fear measures by the senses, God measures by the spirit. And when we tune our ears to the divine voice rather than the fearful one, we begin to move with confidence, step by step, into the life we were meant to live. Fear isolates. It makes us small. It convinces us that we are alone in our struggle. God's vision includes community, support, guidance, and love. It reminds us that we do not walk alone, that the very universe conspires to align circumstances, people, and resources for our good. When fear tries to convince us that we are inadequate, God's vision reminds us that we are equipped with everything we need to rise, to act, to shine, to fulfill our calling. The gap between fear and vision is faith. Faith is the bridge that allows us to step beyond the confines of worry and limitation into the expansiveness of God's plan. Faith is the trust that God's vision is larger, wiser, and more gracious than our imagination allows. Faith says, "I do not yet see the whole path, but I will step forward anyway." Faith says, "I do not yet understand all the reasons, but I will act with courage anyway." Faith says, "Even if fear speaks, I will listen to the one who sees more." God's vision often asks us to risk discomfort. It asks us to step into new roles, to take bold actions, to embrace change, to dream without hesitation. It asks us to release control, to trust unseen outcomes, to lean into the divine wisdom that surpasses our own. Fear resists these steps because it cannot see the unseen. It cannot comprehend the full picture. It cannot imagine the victory yet to come. And so faith becomes essential because faith allows us to act even when fear remains. God's vision is patient. It does not force us. It does not rush us. It does not abandon us when we hesitate. It waits with us, cultivates us, teaches us, and strengthens us. The delay we experience is not rejection, it is preparation. The challenges we face are not punishment, they are refinement. The fear we feel is not a signal to retreat, it is a signal to awaken, to rise, to trust, and to act. Fear can be persuasive. It can dominate our thinking. It can convince us that limitation is reality. It can trap us in the familiar and safe even when our hearts yearn for more. But God's vision pierces that darkness. It stretches beyond doubt, beyond hesitation, beyond what we perceive. It invites us to see ourselves not as we fear we are, but as we are meant to be, courageous, capable, cherished, and destined for growth. God's vision reminds us that even our smallest acts of faith can yield extraordinary results. A kind word, a brave choice, a step into service, a decision to trust, these are not insignificant. They are the building blocks of destiny. Fear may mock them as too small, too insignificant, too insufficient. God sees them as seeds. God sees them as catalysts. God sees them as integral threads in a tapestry too grand for our minds to comprehend. Living with God's vision in mind does not erase fear, but it teaches us to walk with fear without surrendering to it. It teaches us that fear is a signal, not a sentence. It teaches us that courage and faith are available to us even in trembling hands. It teaches us that what we cannot yet see does not determine what is possible. We are invited then to widen our eyes, to open our hearts, to trust in something greater than ourselves. We are called to walk forward even when the path is obscured, even when doubt lingers, even when the world seems to shrink around our worries. God's vision is larger than our fear, more powerful than our hesitation, and more transformative than our limited understanding. When we embrace this truth, our lives begin to change. We begin to act with confidence, to pursue dreams that once seemed impossible, to love without reservation, to serve without fear, to hope without limit. We begin to see opportunities where we once saw obstacles, to recognize blessings where we once saw burdens, to trust in a plan that is unfolding even when we cannot see it in full. God's vision is bigger than fear, and when we allow ourselves to live in that vision, we step into a life of courage, faith, and fulfillment. We step into the calling we were born to answer. We step into the joy we were born to experience. We step into the light of possibility that fear could never extinguish. Fear may speak, but vision prevails. Fear may loom, but faith carries us forward. Fear may threaten, but courage arises. God's vision is bigger than any limitation, any doubt, any worry, any shadow. And when we align ourselves with it, we discover the life we were always meant to live. Rich, expansive, beautiful, and guided by the hand of the divine. We are often taught that to surrender is to give up, to let go of strength, to yield to circumstance, to admit defeat. And yet nothing could be further from the truth. Surrender is not weakness. Surrender is not passivity. Surrender is not resignation. Surrender is the courageous act of alignment with a force greater than ourselves, a recognition that while we can strive, plan, and act, the ultimate unfolding of life is not ours to command. To surrender is to trust. To surrender is to see beyond the confines of our fear. To surrender is to step into the rhythm of the divine, moving not against it but with it. Human beings are wired to control. We map our days, calculate our chances, design our destinies as if the world were a canvas that we alone hold the brush for. We seek security in schedules, confidence in checklists, power in preparation, and there is nothing wrong with planning, with effort, with striving. These are gifts of the mind and the hands. But when striving becomes the master and not the servant, when control is mistaken for wisdom, when effort becomes our idol, we fight against the very currents that are meant to carry us forward. Surrender, then, is the art of releasing the illusion of omnipotence, while retaining the courage to act. Surrender does not mean we stop working. It does not mean we stop dreaming. It does not mean we abandon hope. It means we do all that is ours to do, and then trust the rest to the wisdom of God. It is a recognition that the seeds we plant are nurtured by forces beyond our understanding. It is an acknowledgement that the path we tread may not be the only one, or the straightest one, or the one we had imagined. It is the humility to step aside and allow life to shape us as much as we shape life. Surrender is alignment. Alignment is harmony. It is the realization that our lives are not accidents, that our struggles are not meaningless, that our dreams are not out of reach. Alignment asks us to stop resisting what is inevitable, to stop forcing outcomes that are not yet ripe, to stop trying to bend reality to our will alone. Alignment is the practice of listening, watching, and moving in rhythm with the unseen hand that guides the universe. There is a power in surrender that is often invisible to the hurried eye. It is quiet, steady, and transformative. It works in the hidden places of our hearts, shaping courage, deepening faith, softening resentment, and strengthening hope. When we surrender, we open ourselves to possibility that no calculation could have predicted, to opportunity that no plan could have arranged, to joy that no effort could have manufactured. Surrender does not diminish us, it expands us. It does not weaken us, it strengthens us. Consider the rivers. A river does not struggle against the mountains, it flows around them. It does not resist the rocks. It moves over and past them. Its power is in its persistence and its willingness to follow the natural course, not in forcing the earth to bend to its will. There is wisdom in this, for the river's surrender to its course does not render it powerless. It makes it unstoppable. So it is with surrender to God's plan. We do not diminish ourselves by yielding. We align ourselves with a force that moves the world, that shapes destiny, that brings the unseen into being. Surrender is also the willingness to let go of our need for immediate understanding. We want answers, and we want them now. We want clarity, and we want it perfectly aligned with our timing. We want the pieces of life to fit neatly into our vision, and when they do not, we panic. But life is not linear, and divine purpose is not contingent upon our comprehension. Surrender is the acceptance that understanding is not always a prerequisite for obedience, that trust is more potent than certainty, and that peace is found not in controlling the outcome but in resting within the guidance that we cannot yet see. There are seasons in life where surrender feels impossible. Illness, heartbreak, loss, and disappointment make our hearts tense and our fists clench. We want to hold on tightly to what we believe is ours, what we have earned, what we deserve. Yet it is precisely in these moments that surrender is most transformative. When we release our grip, when we let go of the illusion that we control everything, when we allow the divine to work through us and for us, we discover a freedom that had been hidden behind our resistance. Surrender also requires trust in the unseen. It is not passive hope, but active belief. It is the faith that what is meant to come will come, that what is meant to pass will pass, and that what is meant for us will find us, even if it does so in ways we cannot anticipate. Trusting in God's timing and God's wisdom allows us to act with courage without the burden of anxiety, to dream boldly without the fear of failure, and to live fully without the chains of doubt. To surrender is to embrace humility without self-abandonment. It is to acknowledge that we are not the authors of everything, but neither are we irrelevant. It is to recognize that we are participants in a story larger than ourselves, that our efforts matter, that our choices count, but that the ultimate orchestration is beyond our control. In this way, surrender is neither defeat nor passivity. It is the most courageous alignment of all. Surrender allows us to let go of the need to explain, justify, or manipulate. It releases us from the endless striving to make everything perfect according to our plan. It teaches us patience, endurance, and perspective. It allows space for the unexpected, the miraculous, and the divine. The hand that guides the stars also shapes our lives, and surrender is the art of walking with that hand without trying to redirect it. When we surrender, we become open vessels. We are able to receive guidance, inspiration, and blessings that would otherwise pass unnoticed. We are able to act in harmony with opportunities rather than against them. We are able to move with grace rather than struggle against the inevitable. Surrender opens the door to peace, to clarity, and to purpose. Even the strongest among us must surrender. The wise, the bold, the determined, all must learn that their power is magnified when it is aligned with divine purpose. To resist is human. To surrender is divine. It is not a sign of weakness, but a testament to strength. It is not a step backward, but a step deeper into life's true flow. Surrender teaches us that control is an illusion. We may steer, we may plan, we may act, but the tides of life are guided by forces beyond our perception. Recognizing this truth frees us from anxiety, impatience, and frustration. It allows us to participate in life without being consumed by it. It allows us to act with intention without being enslaved to outcome. Through surrender, we discover the beauty of alignment. Our efforts begin to resonate with the divine rhythm. Our steps fall in harmony with destiny. Our hearts beat in tune with purpose. What we thought required struggle becomes effortless. What we thought needed manipulation becomes natural. What we thought was a challenge becomes a pathway. Surrender turns resistance into flow, confusion into clarity, and fear into courage. Surrender is also a form of worship. It is acknowledging that life is not ours alone to command, that we are not the final authority on our destiny. It is saying, I will do my part and I will trust yours. It is an offering of trust, a bowing of the ego, and a declaration that we believe in a power greater than ourselves. And in that surrender we find not diminishment but empowerment. To live without surrender is to live in constant struggle. To fight against what is inevitable, to cling to illusions of control, to demand certainty in a world designed for mystery. This is exhausting. Surrender, however, brings peace. It allows us to participate fully in life, to contribute with love, to act with courage, and to rest in the knowledge that we are aligned with a plan that is larger, wiser, and more perfect than anything we could have constructed on our own. In surrender, we find strength. In alignment, we find freedom. In trust, we find peace. In letting go, we receive life in its fullness. And in this sacred act we discover that surrender is not weakness. It is the highest form of courage, the truest expression of wisdom, and the doorway to the life we were always meant to live. So release your grip on control, loosen your hold on fear. Step into the flow of divine purpose. Walk in alignment, move with trust, and breathe in the peace that comes from knowing that while you act with diligence, dream with passion, and strive with heart, the unfolding of life is guided by a wisdom far greater than any calculation, any plan, or any fear. Surrender is not weakness, it is alignment, and in that alignment, you will find your power, your purpose, and your peace.